Hello, and welcome to the Port Huron Statement. This episode I'm calling Why Kids Part 4, It Takes a Village to Traffic a Child. In the previous episodes, we've explored the initial stages of exploitation, the tragic dynamics of how parents can be manipulated. We've discussed why children are targeted both for Kompromat and for their vulnerability and the longevity under which they can be exploited. In this episode, we confront another devastating truth. These atrocities do not happen in a vacuum. They are enabled by a silent, sometimes unwitting, sometimes naive, sometimes not, network of complicity. It's a system vast and complex. It truly takes a village to traffic a child. So who are the actors in this system? They are people and institutions that we are expected to trust to protect us. They are politicians that posture and feign virtue. It's law enforcement. Depend on the police to investigate these crimes, but all too often cases are mishandled and evidence is left unexamined. We've seen nationwide issues with thousands of rape kits sitting on shelves for decades, effectively silencing victims and allowing perpetrators to operate with impunity. Then we have the courts. The judicial system, which is supposed to deliver justice, can fail by not believing victims, offering lenient sentences, or dismissing egregious cases for connected plaintiffs, prioritizing the reputation of powerful individuals over the safety of the populace, specifically children. This is the ultimate objectification of humanity. This is where the social contract is most profoundly betrayed. Beyond the police and the courts, we must look at the so-called gatekeepers in our communities. These are the community leaders, the trusted figures within churches and other organizations, and the heads of institutions who are in a position to see, to know, and to act. Further, they're in those positions exactly to act. When they choose to ignore, to conceal, or to move perpetrators around rather than expose them, they become part of the problem. The silence driven by a desire to protect the institution or avoid scandal is a powerful form of complicity. The institutional neglect creates a perfect environment for exploitation. It allows individuals with immense power and influence to build intricate networks of abuse because they know that if they're ever discovered, the system is more likely to protect them than it is to protect their victims. It's a devastating reality that forces us to question the very foundations of the institutions that we rely on for safety. We have to demand better. We have to demand that every actor in the village, from the police officer on the beat to the judge on the bench, does their part. And this is not a lot to expect. The problem gets compounded by silence and the imposition of shame or the enforcement of that very silence that enables this to fester. One of the most insidious tactics employed as a means to control and enable crimes against the vulnerable, and children in particular, is the captive activist, the influenced sponsor, the captured institution, the placement of people that appear to be meaning to help but in fact are operators meant to contain the damage, curate the narrative, protect certain individuals and entities while offering others. Engaging in protracted collective legal action to little effect as a means of distraction and catharsis while offering nothing but further insulation of the status quo. The very education system that has been instituted across the country, and more so the strange quasi-education system that has morphed into the wake of No Child Left Behind and School of Choice, and other machinations intended to enhance the ignorance and isolation of already vulnerable children. This abhorrent mistreatment of children has justified their isolation, making even more convenient their exploitation. The vast majority of abuse, especially sexual abuse, is coming from someone known well to the child victim, not some stranger. So the fostering of fear of strangers is a common tactic meant to isolate children already targeted and to force them in closer proximity with their very abusers. The goal is the fostering of learned helplessness, people that just accept their manipulation, their exploitation, and that develop affection for their very captors. Stockholm Syndrome. This is the goal, to turn you into a complicit and captive actor in a society of exploitation and extraction. I implore you to inform yourself and to refuse to be the easy enablers they depend that you will continue to be. uncomfortably agreeing with apologetic statements for sex offenders and pedophiles that you just don't hear for other crimes, that you just don't hear for crimes involving poor people or those without status, those that have been dehumanized, those that we have been conditioned to despise. Those are the people that you are comfortable with accusing for these crimes, not those that you have been conditioned to aspire to, those that you have been conditioned to like. But crime is not always committed by those we have been conditioned to despise and suspect. In fact, those crimes we find most heinous are rarely committed by those we have been conditioned to hate most. Drug users. Despite the enormous amount of money poured into drug enforcement, there is none poured into protecting the children from this endemic sexual exploitation. A profound amount of media capital has been expended convincing you to equate a drug user with the devastation of civilization. This is a deliberate misleading conception meant to draw attention away from the real problems of our society and to divert them to an endeavor that enables right-wing candidates to find more success. The drug laws were created to disenfranchise left-leaning individuals and to incarcerate them so they don't vote against Nixon, Reagan, etc. This is the result of conversations between Richard Nixon and assorted advisors and individuals that he surrounded himself with. He realized that there was a high degree of correlation between drug use and left-leaning political ideation, and so he sought to criminalize his political foes by criminalizing the drugs. This results in the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 and the Amphetamines Analogs Act of 1971, and things like the DEA as a literal vehicle of incarcerating people that would vote against him. And it works. Think about it. There's 10 million people incarcerated for drug crimes right now. The average presidential election is determined by less than 1 million votes. The drug users have become the scapegoats of the true predators and villains in our society, and drugs have been the tool to discredit those victims. Drugs are used to entice children into sexual exploitation, and then they are used to get the kid incarcerated, discredited, destined for a life of nonstop gaslighting, poverty, and incarceration set in motion by the pedophile that addicted the kid as a means to cover their trail. This is PSYOP 101 manual stuff. These things are done to control you, not for any other reason. You are victimized as a means to condition you to be more helpless and to accept your exploitation. Your victimization is ignored to enhance and assure that the learned helplessness takes. Don't let it. Contact me. I can help you. There are plenty of people waking up to the realities of coercive control and the ubiquity with which these tactics are embedded into institutions and religions and other operations as a means to prey on children's tweens, teens, adults, anyone that is desperate or anyone that's even ambitious to utilize whatever sacrifice, narrative, or grooming needed in order to profit off such transactions, people included. They are lifelong profit centers for the brokers. They are a lifelong cage for the child victim. And for every single person that refuses to be part of this, if you are sincerely against exploitation of children, then you need to be active and you need to be truly politically aware. More often than not, people's virtue is the primary target for their exploitation. A wonderful example is Pizzagate, QAnon, et al., etc. Don't fall for it. There is truth wrapped in bullshit, wrapped in truth, wrapped in bullshit. This is the way that PSYOPs work. It's true, and the manufacture of consent. It's true there is a simulacrum. It's true that there is a massive problem with child sex trafficking and Kompromat, gatekeeping, cultivation, and the use of religion in psychological political operations, and the use of religion to conceal it. And the use of things like appeal to authority. How many pastors have used their godly persona and their verbal war against pedophilia to excuse a momentary lapse or a demonic possession? This is what demon warfare is all about. How many people have played a protector while being the quintessential predator? While using their charities, churches, foundations as access to children and their crusade as a virtue shield for their true actions. Reminds me of a particular organization within another organization with a suspicious penchant for I don't think we're ready for the totality of this, because you can trace the financing, the suppression, to government entities and intelligence services, long-standing religious organizations, politicians galore, and many of the wealthiest families in the nation are all tied to these organizations, which ultimately provide a near-perfect virtue shield while also providing disgusting access to these profoundly disturbing appetites. The key to achieving nearly endless access without serious legal problems is through the activation of crash test dummies, or patsies, to take the fall for the actual organizer and benefactor of the enterprise. This tactic has been thoroughly utilized locally and continues to be utilized across the board in these major Kompromat cases. Even cases like P. Diddy, Epstein, Weinstein, etc. Why hasn't there been more palpable fallout of these cases that implicate so many people so completely in substantial wrongdoing? Initially, we have these massive lists that are supposed to give comprehensive evidence of these networks, yet they result in almost no arrests, if any. Well, this is because it does take a village, and when it really gets going, it takes a federal government too. So, the whole point is, your intuition's right about the Epstein thing. It's entrenched in government, but not just one side. It's not just the right. It's not just the left. The right and the left aren't even a real thing anymore. Ever since Reagan destroyed the unions in the 80s, so the financing for the DNC collapsed. So Clinton seized on this to essentially make the DNC another corporate-funded major party. The difference really between the RNC and the DNC is just which corporations fund them, which industries. It's like oil versus tech. I mean, as a very basic. But both parties are placating corporate interests as their primary objective, because that's where they are getting their financing. And that's ultimately the strings by which our politicians are controlled. Yeah, and then if you look further into Clinton's engagement in these Kompromat economies, you'll realize his presence is notable. And since Clinton's election, there has been really, and even before that, what am I saying? There's been a clear trend towards coercive control and, disgusting means of enabling powerful people to do whatever they want domestically and abroad. And it's destroying the planet, and it's destroying society, and it cannot be tolerated. Not indefinitely. I mean, come on. The reason that they're going after kids is because it's an ultimate loyalty thing. They're conditioning these people so that they're attracted to kids, so then they bait them into doing something with the kids that they document, and then they have them for life. That's the whole thing about this is to have a guaranteed obedience and loyalty, to make someone a robot, an automaton, a program that they can define, where reality for that person is literally whatever they say, because if they betray that person, then they will expose them. What is Epstein, P. Diddy, Weinstein, why did they end up in trouble? Because they did something that, made them a best patsy, yeah. Either they were too fast and loose, or they had done something that necessitated this type of retaliation, which would be an outing, which is the ultimate lever. But they don't just out people because they've betrayed their little network. And because they use so many different names, there's always plausible deniability, but because of a bunch of patterning, and because there are a surprising number of connections that you would think would have been covered up better. But the reason that there aren't more arrests that fall out of Epstein especially is because of the leverage of Kompromat and the fact that this whole house of cards is built on it. It's an economy and a nation that's run by narcissists because of atavistic psychological elements that are throwbacks to when, we were mammals that coordinated hunts. And so they always create an alpha to coordinate the endeavor. And before language and civilization, it didn't really matter who the alpha was. It just mattered that someone coordinated the hunt and possibly defense, etc. But once you have civilization and language, the person that's in charge makes a huge difference. Their ability to lead, the number of people that they lead, etc., etc. Like now we have civilization. We can't just let the ambitious assholes run the country and gaslight people, lie to people, coordinate other people, to lie to the public, bait people into these extortion triages. This is a Lord of the Flies situation. But as soon as we cease to allow these zero-sum paradigms to literally oppress us, to enable what is ultimately an enormous pedophilia ring that poses as a legitimate government, once we shed that BS, then we can actually step into post-zero-sum economic thinking, which would allow for this planet to actually flourish while giving humanity plenty. We could afford a much better quality of life for everyone without damaging the environment. In fact, damaging the environment substantially less, and working towards, in 10 years, we could do so much better. In 20 years, we could have such a better society if our goal just ceases to be controlling one another, dominating one another, tricking one another. It's not lucrative. The more time you spend destroying or sabotaging, the more the world itself becomes sabotaged. How much time does our economy allow for just the expenditure of money in the pursuit of destruction? Because all of this is that. We cannot build a government on destroying children. Not one that's going to last and that will have anything other than a destructive influence on humanity itself, like it has. And ever since these coercive control tactics have been embraced by the intelligence community, we've been seeing things go awry. The results are clear. The school shootings, just shootings in general, and these public violent outbursts, these are directly related to the way that people en masse are being abused and psychologically manipulated. And when you look a little bit under the surface, you'll start to realize that there are a lot of very interesting claims that some of these perpetrators of these terrorist acts make, domestic terrorist acts, that indicate that there are common influences that inspire them to do these things, and they're not natural influences, not things that happen spontaneously. Just like Ted Kaczynski didn't spontaneously decide to become the Unabomber, he was the subject of an MK Ultra behavior modification program, and that is declassified, that is fact. So there are a lot of these, a lot of instances where the intelligence services or other government entities have worked on people either explicitly or under cover of something else on behavior modification or MK or mind control type experimentation, and those individuals have gone on to commit terrorist acts. And so then we go beyond the ones that we know for a fact that the government has declassified information revealing, for example, Ted Kaczynski's direct involvement in MK Ultra, right? I'm pretty sure it was just MK Ultra. It might have been another program, but I think it was just MK Ultra. But anyway, if we look at some of the recent shooters, we'll see that there are a lot of them that are claiming, the ones that didn't end up dead, which is almost all of them end up dead, but that they were subjected to very extreme psychological manipulation, experimentation. And whether that's true or not, history would say it probably is. Because Actually, almost every person that has claimed that has been part of their narrative, once the full story is declassified, it always ends up being part of the narrative. I can't think of one offhand that hasn't gone that way. Almost every single time it ends up right. So, yeah, just some food for thought. And please wake up and don't make it so easy for you and the children and the community at large to be exploited by ignorant, moneyed interests that feign authentic religious belief in order to use it as a shield and use it as a source. So, don't forget, in the Bible, it mentions that people will use the Word of God as a means to advance a satanic agenda. That's in Revelations. So keep this in mind.